Birthday parties can spiral into chaos in the blink of an eye. We have collected 33 of the most bizarre and unforgettable birthday party stories from all across America. You are about to hear tales of magical mishaps, animal invasions, and confectionery catastrophes. What happens when a simple balloon release grounds military aircraft? How does a magician vanish a little too well? What was the most memorable birthday party you ever attended? Sometimes a simple wish for a spectacular party can lead to an unforgettable disaster. In the summer of 1998, in a quiet suburban town, a parent decided their child's birthday would be the most memorable one ever. Their plan was deceptively simple: to fill an entire community center multipurpose room from floor to ceiling with colorful helium balloons. For days, they worked, tying and inflating thousands upon thousands of balloons until the room was a solid, buoyant mass of rubber and ribbon. The effect was breathtaking, a seemingly endless sea of color that reached the ceiling, but it created an unseen and dangerous pressure differential. When a child finally pushed the door open to see the surprise, the physics of the situation took over instantly. The higher air pressure from the hallway rushed into the balloon-filled room, and the entire wall of balloons erupted outward in a single, overwhelming wave. It was not a gentle drift. It was a roaring, tumbling avalanche of latex that instantly swept the children off their feet. The chaotic river of balloons carried the laughing, then screaming, children down the long hallway like a bizarre, colorful flash flood. They were completely trapped within the buoyant current, unable to stand or find a handhold. Panicked parents waded into the flowing mass, but it was impossible to make progress or even locate all the children. The call to the fire department was one of sheer confusion. How do you explain that your birthday party requires a rescue operation? The firefighters arrived to a scene they could never have trained for, a hallway choked with balloons and the muffled cries of children buried somewhere within. It took them nearly an hour to carefully push through the dense pack, popping balloons by the hundred to slowly clear a path and pluck each child to safety. Miraculously, everyone was fine, just thoroughly shaken and covered in static cling. The community center, however, was finding bits of broken balloon in air vents for years to come. That balloon avalanche was a force of nature, but sometimes the chaos comes on four hooves. For one affluent family in a gated community, their daughter's 5th birthday was meant to be a picture of rustic charm. They spared no expense, hiring a full traveling petting zoo to transform their pristine, manicured backyard into a slice of the countryside. There were fluffy sheep, a gentle pony, and a few surprisingly clever pygmy goats. The children were delighted, feeding the animals and laughing as they roamed within their secure, temporary pens. Everything was perfect until it was not. One particular goat, a sturdy and intelligent fellow, had grown bored with his enclosure. He had been watching the humans fiddle with the simple latch on his gate, and with a few persistent nudges of his head, he figured out the mechanism. With a decisive click, the gate swung open. His freedom was contagious. He promptly moved to the next pen, and with the same focused determination, head butted that latch open too. In a matter of moments, the entire backyard was filled with a confused but jubilant farm animal stampede. The sheep, now leaderless, bolted as a woolly mass straight toward the glittering blue swimming pool. They did not stop at the edge. One after another, they tumbled into the water, their heavy wool instantly becoming waterlogged, turning the pool into a murky, chaotic stew of bleating animals and floating debris. The pony, spooked by the commotion, galloped straight through a carefully arranged dessert table, sending a custom fondant castle flying. The real spectacle began when the animals discovered the neighborhood was not as contained as the backyard. A small gate leading to the community green had been left ajar. The entire menagerie, now a panicked herd, poured into the quiet cul-de-sac. The sight of a determined goat leading a trail of sheep, a soggy and disoriented pony, and a few runaway chickens past manicured rose bushes was one the neighbors would not soon forget. One resident, taking out his recycling, froze in sheer disbelief. The birthday girl, from her vantage point on the patio, found the whole event absolutely thrilling, cheering on the escaping animals as if it were the main event. It took the combined efforts of the petting zoo staff, the family, and a growing number of amused and startled neighbors over 2 hours to round up all the escapees. The backyard was a wreck, the pool was a loss, and the family gained a legendary story about the day a single goat outsmarted an entire birthday party. A magician's greatest trick should not be forgetting his own audience. In a small Ohio town, a parent hired a local magician named the Magnificent Marvin for their son's 7th birthday party. Marvin was known for his grand finale, a disappearing act that always left kids gasping. The living room was packed with children cross-legged on the floor, their eyes wide with anticipation as Marvin performed his smaller tricks with a flourish. The air was thick with excitement for the main event. He unveiled his large, ornate cabinet decorated with stars and moons, and with a dramatic bow, he stepped inside, closing the doors behind him. The children waited, barely breathing. The assistant, a teenage neighbor hired to hold a curtain, counted down from 10. On 0, she pulled the curtain away with a snap. The cabinet doors were opened to reveal nothing but empty space. The silence that followed was not one of awe, but of profound confusion. The magician was simply gone. At first, the children thought it was part of the act. They clapped hesitantly, waiting for him to reappear from a closet or behind a sofa. But seconds turned into a full minute, and then 2. The birthday boy's face began to crumple. The promised grand finale had ended with no magician, no bow, and no explanation. Panic set in among the adults, who began frantically searching the house, calling Marvin's name. They checked every room, the basement, and even the backyard, but found no trace of him. His van, however, was still parked right outside on the street. One of the parents peered through the windshield and saw a shape moving inside. There, stretched out across the backseat, still in his full stage costume, was the Magnificent Marvin, fast asleep. He had been working multiple gigs all weekend and had been utterly exhausted. After closing himself into the secret compartment of his cabinet, the gentle rocking motion and the darkness had apparently lulled him straight to sleep. He slept right through his own dramatic reveal, the growing confusion, and the frantic search party. He only woke up when a parent finally knocked loudly on the van window, jolting him from a dream, no doubt, of a very different kind of applause. A sleeping magician is one thing, but what if the main attraction at a birthday party was not invited by the parents at all? For a family in Savannah, Georgia, a spooky theme seemed like the perfect way to celebrate their son's 10th birthday. They went all out, renting a historic mansion known to locals for its ghost stories and eerie atmosphere. They decorated with fake cobwebs and cardboard skeletons, setting the stage for a fun, fabricated scare. The children arrived in costumes, giggling nervously as they explored the cavernous, creaking house. The party began with the usual games, but a strange chill settled over the proceedings. It started with the lights. Throughout the old home, chandeliers and sconces would flicker and dim for no apparent reason, despite the electrician's report stating the wiring was perfectly sound. Then came the sounds, soft, disembodied whispers that seemed to drift down empty hallways. A few parents dismissed it as the house settling or clever audio tricks, but the children were insistent. They were hearing distinct voices when no one else was around. The climax of the unexplained events came from the birthday boy himself. He had wandered away from the main group, drawn to a quiet, book-lined study. When his mother found him a few minutes later, he was not alone, at least not in his own mind. He was chatting amiably, looking up at an empty wingback chair. He told his startled mother he was talking to the nice man in the big chair, a man with a kind face and a tall, black top hat. The man, the boy explained, had wished him a happy birthday and said he was glad children were laughing in the house again. The description matched no living guest at the party. but it did match historical photographs of the home's original owner, a gentleman known for his formal attire and particular fondness for top hats. The fabricated haunted house party had accidentally invited a real resident, one who seemed to enjoy the celebration far more than anyone had anticipated. The ghostly guest in Savannah was an uninvited surprise, but some party chaos is born from a very human desire to win at all costs. In an upscale California suburb, one mother's vision for her son's 8th birthday was not just fun, but a testament to her family's superiority. She planned a full-scale backyard Olympics, complete with miniature obstacle courses, a ring toss, and a dizzying game that involved moving cookies from your forehead to your mouth without using your hands. The stakes were high, with a massive, glittering trophy for the overall champion. From the start, the atmosphere was less about celebration and more about intense competition, fueled by the mother's constant running commentary. She cheered a little too loudly for her own son and offered pointed, critical advice to the other children. As the games progressed, one event involved carefully stacking a wobbly tower of plastic cups with one hand. The mother, acting as both judge and participant in this parental-child team event, was overseeing her son's turn. His tower was teetering on the brink of collapse. In a moment of pure, unthinking impulse, she reached out and steadied the structure with her own hand. The action was blatant, witnessed by every child and parent present. A collective, stunned silence fell over the backyard. The rule had been simple and clear: no outside help. The teenage party helper, hired to manage the scoreboard, nervously spoke up, stating the obvious: that was a disqualification. The mother's face, once a mask of determined cheer, completely crumbled. The correction, delivered so simply by a teenager, shattered her entire facade. She did not just get upset. She had a full, tearful meltdown right there on the lawn, insisting through sobs that she was only trying to help, that the rules were unfair, and that everyone was ganging up on her. The birthday boy stared at his mother, his own face a portrait of confusion and embarrassment. The party ground to an absolute halt. The other parents exchanged awkward glances, unsure whether to comfort her or usher their own children away from the spectacle. The grand trophy remained unclaimed, a shiny symbol of a competition where the adult forgot that the only thing truly supposed to win was a child's happiness. A competitive mother's meltdown over a plastic cup tower is a special kind of chaos, but it pales next to the sheer physics of a sugary shipwreck. The centerpiece of a young pirate's birthday in coastal Maine was a masterpiece of confectionery engineering, a 3-tiered cake sculpted to look like a fearsome galleon. Its sails were made of delicate rice paper, its hull was meticulously textured with chocolate frosting to resemble wood, and a proud Jolly Roger flag flew from its highest mast. The only problem was the warm, crowded kitchen where it was assembled. For hours, the dense cake layers and heavy buttercream began to soften the internal support structure. It was a slow, almost imperceptible process. At first, only the most observant guests noticed the ship seemed to be riding a very gentle, invisible wave, tilting ever so slightly to starboard. The tilt became more pronounced as the time for the birthday song approached. The pirate ship was not sailing the high seas, it was slowly sinking in a sea of rising room temperature. Just as the family gathered around the table, lit candles flickering, and began to sing Happy Birthday, the inevitable happened. A sickening crack came from within the cake's core. The entire structure groaned, and then, in a majestic, slow-motion tragedy, the pirate ship listed violently to one side. It did not just fall over. It collapsed in on itself, a tidal wave of chocolate and vanilla cake, buttercream frosting, and fondant rigging crashing across the table. The Jolly Roger was the last to go, swallowed by the sugary avalanche. The tidal wave of cake swept presents off the table, coated the tablecloth in a thick layer of crumbs and frosting, and sent a spray of colorful sprinkles across the floor. The birthday boy, who had been watching his magnificent cake with wide-eyed excitement, now watched in horrified silence as his pirate dream dissolved into a disaster zone. The singing faltered and died, replaced by a collective gasp followed by the sound of a single child beginning to cry. The kitchen looked like a bakery had exploded. It was a catastrophe of epic and very sticky proportions. That sugary shipwreck was a contained disaster, but nature itself can be an unpredictable party guest. A family in the Colorado Rockies planned a perfect camping-themed birthday for their daughter, transforming their sprawling backyard into a wilderness retreat with tents, a crackling fire pit, and the irresistible aroma of grilled hot dogs and toasting marshmallows for s'mores. The children were in their element, their faces glowing in the firelight as they laughed and shared stories. The scene was idyllic until the forest at the edge of their property began to rustle with a movement far too heavy for a squirrel. A large black bear, a regular but usually shy resident of the area, ambled out of the tree line. It was not being aggressive, merely profoundly curious, its nose twitching as it followed the potent scent trail of dinner directly into the party. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The children fell silent, their roasting sticks held motionless over the fire. Then, a single, sharp gasp broke the spell, and the backyard erupted into a scene of controlled pandemonium. Parents scrambled, scooping up children and ushering them in a frantic but quiet rush toward the safety of the house. The bear, completely unbothered by the sudden exodus, continued its slow, deliberate investigation. It was a creature on a mission, and its mission was the party food. It ambled over to the picnic table, its powerful frame a stark contrast to the red-checkered tablecloth. With a single, casual swipe of its paw, it sent a platter of hamburger buns flying. It then turned its attention to the large, heavy coolers lined up against the deck. The adults watched from the kitchen window, hearts pounding, as the bear sniffed at the plastic latches. With a surprising display of strength and intelligence, it used its claws to pry one open, the lid clattering to the patio. It proceeded to help itself to the contents, carefully selecting juice boxes and hot dog packages with a discerning palate. The entire intrusion lasted about 10 minutes, a surreal interlude where a wild animal calmly ransacked a birthday feast. When it had eaten its fill, the bear simply turned and lumbered back into the woods, leaving behind a scene of scattered debris and a story that would be told and retold for years. The birthday girl, safe inside, declared it the best party ever because a real bear came to visit. A bear raiding the coolers is an act of animal instinct, but a human party crasher operates on a far more audacious level. In a sun-drenched Florida suburb, a family was celebrating their son's 6th birthday with a backyard barbecue. The guest list was a mix of neighbors, classmates, and a few out-of-town relatives, including an uncle named Steve who was driving in from a few hours away. The party was in full swing, with children splashing in the pool and the scent of grilled burgers filling the air, when a friendly, unassuming man in his 40s walked confidently through the open gate. He was smiling, he knew the birthday boy's name, and he introduced himself to the hosts as Uncle Steve. The parents, busy managing the chaos, simply assumed this was the relative they had only met a handful of times. They welcomed him warmly, apologizing for not recognizing him immediately. The man waved it off, saying it had been too long, and seamlessly integrated himself into the festivities. He played a round of cornhole with some of the other adults, charmed the grandparents with stories of his supposed drive, and even helped the birthday boy open a few presents. When the magnificent superhero cake was brought out, he sang happy birthday with gusto and gladly accepted a large slice. He was, by all accounts, the perfect guest, thoughtful and engaged. The real twist came as the party was winding down. Another car pulled into the driveway and out stepped a very confused man holding a wrapped present. He approached the host and said, "Hello, it's me, Steve. Sorry I'm so late." The parents stared, their smiles freezing. They pointed to the man now lounging in a patio chair, contentedly finishing his cake. "Who," they asked, "is that?" The two Steves looked at each other across the patio, one in bewildered shock, the other in deer in the headlights' panic. The imposter's smooth facade shattered in an instant. He dropped his paper plate, mumbled a hasty apology about having the wrong house, and practically sprinted out the gate and down the street, disappearing before anyone could even process what had happened. He left behind a half-eaten slice of cake, a bewildered family, and one unopened action figure that a very convincing stranger had accepted as a gift. The real Uncle Steve was left to explain to a 6-year-old why there were two of him, and the family was left with an unsettling mystery and a legendary story about the man who crashed a party, not by hiding in the shadows, but by boldly claiming a leading role. The chaos of an uninvited party guest pales next to the disappointment of a treasure trove that makes no sense. In a bustling backyard in Houston, Texas, a traditional birthday piñata hung from a tree limb, a brightly colored donkey that promised a shower of sweet rewards. The children, armed with a plastic bat and blindfolded, took their swings with gleeful anticipation. Finally, a solid crack sent the donkey splitting open, and its contents rained down upon the eager, upturned faces. The scramble began instantly, but the triumphant shouts quickly turned to cries of confusion. Instead of chocolate and hard candy, the children were scooping up hard, bone-shaped dog biscuits. Mixed in with the kibble were handfuls of tarnished pennies and nickels, and small, foil-wrapped packets of soy sauce. One little girl, her hands filled with loose change and a beef-flavored treat, looked up at her mother with utter betrayal. The scene descended into a bizarre sort of poverty, with children trading pennies for soy sauce packets. Utterly bewildered by their worthless loot, the culprit was soon discovered. The birthday boy's older brother, who had been tasked with filling the piñata, had been in a tremendous hurry. He had grabbed the first bag he saw in the pantry, assuming it was a bulk bag of candy, not realizing it was the family dog's special food. To add weight, he had then dumped out the contents of a giant jar of loose change collected for a vacation fund, and for good measure, he threw in a handful of leftover soy sauce packets from a recent takeout order. He thought the shiny packets looked like fun-sized candies. The parents were horrified, watching their child's birthday celebration turn into a confusing and deeply unsatisfying free-for-all. The children, trying to make the best of a bad situation, eventually started throwing the dog treats for the family's actual dog, who was having the absolute best day of his life. The birthday boy, however, was left with a pocket full of coins and the lingering, salty smell of soy, a stark reminder that sometimes the biggest surprise at a party is not a good one. A misguided piñata is a disappointment, but a public spectacle can captivate an entire nation. A family had saved for over a year to give their 5-year-old son the ultimate birthday gift, a trip to the world's most famous theme park. The day was a whirlwind of rides, character meet and greets, and sugary treats, a marathon of forced merriment. By late afternoon, the sheer sensory overload became too much for the birthday boy. As the sun began to set and the park's grand evening parade started its procession down Main Street, his tiny engine finally ran out of fuel. The music was too loud, the crowds were too dense, and the looming giant mouse was suddenly terrifying. He did not cry or scream, he simply sat down, right in the exact center of the bustling thoroughfare. Cross-legged and resolute, he became an immovable island in a river of marching floats and dancing performers. The parade, a meticulously choreographed spectacle of music and light, ground to an awkward halt directly behind him. A giant, smiling duck float was forced to stop its advance, its cheerful music faltering as the costumed dancers nearby shuffled uncertainly. At first, his parents tried gentle coaxing, then firm commands, but the boy was in a state of pure, overwhelmed defiance. He would not be moved. The situation escalated from a family matter to a logistical crisis in moments. Park security was summoned not to arrest a tiny protester, but to gently negotiate with a tired 5-year-old. The lead officer, a patient woman, got down on one knee to speak with him at his level, offering stickers and a quiet promise of a churro if he would just shift his protest a few feet to the curb. All the while, this entire surreal tableau was being documented by dozens, then hundreds, of cell phones held aloft by the surrounding crowd. The image of a single, small boy holding up a multi-million-dollar parade spread across the internet in minutes. He was not being malicious, he was just utterly done with his own birthday, and his silent, powerful protest resonated with anyone who has ever felt overwhelmed by the world's demands. After what felt like an eternity to his mortified parents, the security officer's gentle diplomacy finally worked. The boy, clutching a new sticker, allowed himself to be scooped up and carried to the sidewalk. The parade resumed, the giant duck rolled past, and the birthday boy was fast asleep in his father's arms before they even reached the park exit, completely unaware that his personal moment of overload had just become a viral lesson in the limits of a child's endurance. A child's simple request for a summer water war can unleash a truly unforeseen torrent. The forecast for one boy's birthday in suburban Illinois called for thunderstorms, forcing his parents to relocate the entire aquatic battle to the only available indoor space, their newly finished basement. They assured themselves it would be fine, reasoning that the waterproof couch covers and tile floor could handle a little splashing. They gravely underestimated the sheer firepower of modern water weaponry and the competitive spirit of 12-year-old boys. The basement quickly transformed into a steamy, chaotic war zone, with teams hiding behind leather sofas and shelving units. The initial skirmishes involved small, squirt pistols, but soon the heavy artillery emerged from duffel bags. High-capacity, pump-action water blasters capable of firing continuous, pressurized streams became the weapons of choice. The gentle splashing escalated into a full-scale indoor monsoon. Water balloons were not just thrown, they were launched with strategic force against the paneled walls. The air grew thick with the sound of pumping mechanisms, triumphant shouts, and the constant, ominous splatter of water hitting everything. The first sign of serious trouble was a sudden, sharp pop from the corner entertainment center, followed by the distinct smell of burnt electronics and a wisp of smoke. The large television screen flickered and died, along with the game console and stereo system, but the real disaster was silently unfolding just a few feet away. A carefully aimed volley from a super soaker had arced perfectly over a defensive barricade of chairs, landing directly on a low wooden bookshelf. This shelf did not hold paperbacks. It housed the birthday boy's father's meticulously preserved and incredibly valuable collection of vintage comic books from the 1960s. The pressurized stream struck a long box, soaking through the cardboard and instantly causing the vibrant, four-color pages inside to swell and bleed. The inks from a first-edition superhero comic began to run, a slow, tragic melt of decades-old history dissolving into a puddle of murky color. The flood itself was discovered when one of the combatants slipped and fell, his hand landing in a shallow but spreading lake that was creeping from the drain in the center of the floor. The water had nowhere to go, slowly soaking into the area rugs and seeping under the baseboards. The party was called to an immediate and soggy halt. The children stood dripping in a sudden, guilty silence as the parents surveyed the damage, the true cost of the indoor water war dawning on them. The basement had not just gotten wet, it had been functionally waterboarded. The short-circuited electronics were a costly inconvenience, but the sight of those ruined comics, their heroes washed away by a friendly fire incident, was a loss that could not be measured in dollars or cents. Even the most meticulously planned party can fall victim to a simple clerical error. For a family aspiring to Hollywood glamour, their daughter's 8th birthday was to be a star-studded affair. They booked a celebrity lookalike, paying a premium for a performer who could perfectly embody a beloved pop star known for her catchy songs and vibrant persona. The children were buzzing with excitement for weeks, dreaming of singing and dancing with their idol. The day arrived and the backyard was a vision of paparazzi-themed decorations with a red carpet leading to the main event area. Right on schedule, a sleek black car pulled up and out stepped a man who was unmistakably a very convincing lookalike for a famously grumpy television chef. He was dressed in a crisp white jacket and carried a small cooler, looking every bit the part of a culinary maestro. The parents were initially confused, assuming there had been a last-minute change. The man, a working actor who did this particular lookalike gig frequently, took their hesitant welcome as confirmation. He strode confidently into the party, announcing in a booming voice that he was here to teach the children how to make the perfect mini burger. The silence that followed was deafening. The children, a sea of sparkly tops and disappointed faces, stared at him. They were promised a pop concert, not a cooking demonstration. The actor, completely committed to his role, tried to pivot. He attempted to lead a game of culinary charades which involved miming the act of chopping an onion. The children just continued to stare, utterly bewildered. One little girl finally whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Where is the singing?" The actor, now sweating under the California sun, tried another approach. He started singing a popular pop song, but in the gruff, baritone voice of the chef he was impersonating. The result was a bizarre, almost menacing rendition of a bubblegum pop anthem that only served to further confuse and slightly frighten his young audience. The parents finally pulled out their booking confirmation, realizing with dawning horror that the agency had sent the completely wrong celebrity. The party devolved into a surreal standoff, with a dedicated D-list actor valiantly trying to engage a crowd of increasingly restless children with tales of reducing a pan sauce, while the birthday girl sat on the grass near tears, wondering why a famous chef had ruined her birthday. The agency eventually sent over the correct performer hours later, but the magic was gone, replaced by the lingering memory of a very confused man offering unsolicited cooking tips at a party meant for pop music and dance. Some birthday memories are so precious we try to physically preserve them. For one family, their daughter's 10th birthday felt like a perfect moment to capture for the future. The party itself was a simple backyard affair, but its conclusion was meant to be its legacy. They gathered the guests and the birthday girl to fill a sturdy, waterproof metal box with treasures from the year 2008. They included popular teen magazines, a handwritten letter from the birthday girl about her hopes and dreams, a mix CD of her favorite songs, and a disposable camera filled with pictures from the party itself. With great ceremony, they buried the box deep in a corner of the garden, covering it with soil and marking the spot with a large, distinctive river rock veined with quartz. It was a beautiful, symbolic gesture, a promise to the future. The family took pictures of the burial, swore they would never forget, and moved on with their lives. But life has a way of erasing even the most heartfelt landmarks. Over the next few years, the backyard underwent several transformations. A new patio extension covered a large section of the lawn. A swing set was installed, then later removed. A flower bed was expanded, and the soil was turned and amended repeatedly. The river rock, once so prominent, was likely moved during one of these projects, perhaps used as a border stone or simply tossed into a pile of landscaping materials. The specific memory of which corner of the yard they had used faded, replaced by the busyness of daily life. When the family eventually moved away, the secret of the time capsule moved with them, completely forgotten. The new owners loved the house and made it their own, unaware that a piece of the past was waiting somewhere under their petunias. The story truly begins years later, when the now adult birthday woman, nostalgic for her childhood, remembered the buried treasure. She found the old photos of the burial party, but they only showed a general area of the yard, not a precise location. She tracked down the address of her old home and, with a hopeful heart, sent a polite letter to the current residents. She explained the situation, describing the metal box and the quartz-veined rock, and humbly asked if she might have permission to come dig for it. The current homeowners were, to say the least, deeply perplexed. They had never seen such a rock, and the idea that a stranger wanted to excavate their garden was both bizarre and slightly concerning. They wrote back a courteous but firm refusal, explaining they had done significant landscaping and did not feel comfortable with the request. But the birthday woman was not so easily deterred. Every few years, a new letter or email would arrive, each one a little more desperate, a little more detailed. She tried sending annotated copies of her childhood photos with circles drawn around blurry trees in the background. She offered to pay for any damage to the lawn and to work only under their supervision. The current owners found themselves in an odd position, the guardians of a secret they did not ask for and a treasure map they could not read. They would look out at their backyard, a space they knew intimately, and wonder if they were walking over a decade-old birthday party every single day. The mystery persists, a quiet, unresolved quest. The time capsule remains buried, a perfect snapshot of a single day, waiting for a landmark that no longer exists and a reunion that may never happen. The quiet desperation of a lost time capsule is one thing, but a relentless auditory assault is another matter entirely. A karaoke machine was supposed to be the highlight of a 7th birthday party, promising a rotating cast of young singers belting out their favorite tunes. For the first hour, it was a roaring success, with children enthusiastically, if not tunefully, performing a variety of pop songs and cartoon themes. The problem began subtly, with a slight digital stutter during a particularly high-pitched rendition of a popular children's song about a baby shark. The machine seemed to hiccup, the music skipped, and then it just stopped, but only the singing stopped. The relentlessly cheerful, synth-driven instrumental track kept going and going and going. The machine had frozen, locking into a continuous, seamless loop of the same 30-second chorus. At first, the kids thought it was funny, dancing in a circle and shouting the lyrics over the repeating music. But after 5 minutes, the novelty began to wear off. After 10 minutes, the cheerful tune was starting to feel less like a song and more like psychological warfare. The parents tried everything. They pressed the power button, nothing. They pressed every other button on the machine, a frantic symphony of beeps that did nothing to interrupt the aquatic anthem. They tried unplugging the microphone, hoping to break the cycle. The machine, undeterred, continued its joyful, maddening broadcast. The real crisis began when they discovered the machine was plugged into a special outdoor outlet on the side of the house, an outlet controlled by a separate, hard-to-reach circuit breaker inside the garage. And that was the moment the sky opened up. A sudden, torrential downpour drenched the backyard, sending children and adults scrambling for cover under the patio. But the karaoke machine, protected by a small overhang, played on, its tinny speakers now competing with the roar of the rain. For over an hour, the party was held hostage. Conversations were impossible, games were unthinkable. All anyone could do was sit under the patio cover, listening to the same few bars of music, each repetition chipping away at their sanity. The children were overstimulated and cranky. The adults were developing a collective twitch. Finally, one father, a man of quiet resolve, had reached his limit. Declaring he could not take another second of it, he grabbed a dish towel, threw it over his head like a makeshift hood, and marched out into the deluge. He sloshed across the sodden lawn, his shoes filling with water as he rounded the corner of the house. The outlet was soaked, a potentially dangerous situation, but desperation outweighed caution. He reached out with the dry towel, wrapped his hand, and yanked the plug from the wall. The silence was instantaneous and profound, broken only by the steady drumming of the rain and a single, spontaneous cheer from the huddled crowd on the patio. They were finally free, left with ringing ears and a core memory forever linked to the song about a family of sharks. The silent, air-conditioned tomb became a pressure cooker of panic. This was no longer a game. A birthday party at a brand new escape room venue had taken a terrifying turn when the grand finale, the unlocking of the massive stone effect door to escape the Egyptian tomb, failed. A loud clunk from the electronic lock was followed by absolute silence. The door, designed to swing open with a dramatic creak, remained sealed. They were not just logically stuck, they were physically imprisoned. The initial excitement of 2 children, 3 parents, and the party host curdled into a cold dread. They had solved every puzzle, found the golden scarab, and placed it in the altar, triggering the mechanism that was supposed to grant their freedom. Instead, it had triggered a catastrophic technical glitch that left them entombed. The host, a teenager named Chloe, tried to remain calm, repeatedly pressing the emergency call button on the wall. A tiny red light blinked, but no voice answered from the control room. Her walkie-talkie produced only static. The single air vent high on the wall provided oxygen, but it also carried the faint, mocking scent of pizza from the party room they were supposed to be celebrating in. The children's brave faces began to crumple as the first 10 minutes stretched into 20. The room, once an exciting landscape of hieroglyphics and secret compartments, now felt claustrophobic and sinister. One of the parents, an engineer, tried to reason with the door, examining its edges for a manual release that did not exist. The other parents took turns trying to keep the children distracted, inventing new, quieter games in the dim light while their own anxiety mounted. The outside world, meanwhile, was in chaos. The venue manager had been called away for a family emergency, leaving a single, flustered employee at the front desk who had no training on the room's override systems. When the trapped group failed to emerge, she assumed they had failed the challenge and were waiting for a hint. It was only when a parent managed to get a single bar of cell service and sent a frantic text message to a spouse outside that the true emergency was understood. The fire department arrived to a scene of bureaucratic confusion, the employee unable to provide the blueprints or the code for the electronic lock. The firefighters assessed the reinforced door, designed to feel authentic and immovable, and realized they could not pick it or reason with it. They had to cut it out. The sound of the hydraulic rescue tools, the whine of the saw biting into metal and wood, was both terrifying and deeply relieving for those trapped inside. They huddled in the farthest corner, covering the children's ears as sparks flew and the door shuddered. When the opening was finally carved, it was not a triumphant escape but a grim, exhausted procession into the bright, fluorescent light of the hallway. They had been inside for nearly 2 hours. The birthday boy was clutching the plastic golden scarab, his ultimate prize, but the real memory was the look of sheer relief on his face as he stepped over the mangled door frame and into his mother's arms, leaving a piece of his childhood courage behind in the fake Egyptian tomb. A simple wish to send joy into the sky can sometimes have unintended consequences on the ground. For a family celebrating their daughter's birthday on a sunny California beach, the grand finale was a moment of pure magic, a coordinated release of several hundred vibrant, helium-filled latex balloons. The children watched with upturned, smiling faces as the colorful orbs climbed, a beautiful, rising symbol of their celebration, but the wind had other plans. A sudden, powerful gust swept in from the ocean, catching the entire ascending cloud and pushing it not out to sea, but inland, directly toward the sprawling complex of a nearby naval air station. The cheerful, bobbing mass became a navigational nightmare, drifting squarely into the flight paths of multi-million-dollar aircraft. On the ground, the party continued, completely unaware of the chain of events they had just set in motion. Within the control tower, radar screens lit up with a strange, clustered cloud of slow-moving contacts. The balloons were not just a visual obstruction, they posed a critical danger to jet engines, which could choke on the ingested latex, and to cockpit canopies, which could crack on impact. The only safe course of action was an immediate, full-stop grounding of all flight operations. Training exercises were cancelled. Scheduled landings were put into holding patterns far out over the Pacific, and the entire base was put on a temporary but costly hold. The military police did not arrive with sirens, but their presence was no less authoritative. 2 uniformed officers in a marked vehicle pulled onto the beach, their sober demeanor a stark contrast to the festive scene. They located the party hosts and explained, in very clear and firm terms, the significant hazard their beautiful gesture had just created. The parents were mortified, their faces flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and fear as the officers detailed the potential for catastrophic engine failure and the immense financial cost of the halted operations. The children, who moments before had been laughing, now watched in confused silence as their parents received what amounted to an official reprimand. The officers were professional, but the message was unmistakable. Their celebration had inadvertently compromised national security and safety. The birthday girl burst into tears, not fully understanding the military implications, but feeling the weight of the adults' acute distress. The party ended not with cake and laughter, but with a quiet, shame-faced cleanup of the few balloons that had not escaped. A stark reminder that even the most well-intentioned traditions can have a disastrous impact when they take flight. A bounce house is meant to be a source of pure, earthbound joy, but that assumption was violently challenged at a park party in a windy coastal town. The day was breezy, but the parents had secured the inflatable castle with the provided stakes, confident they had taken sufficient precautions. For over an hour, the structure was a cacophony of laughter and bouncing, a vibrant blue and yellow beacon against the green grass. Then a powerful, unexpected gust of wind, a microburst that the weather service had not predicted, swept across the open field. It did not just shake the castle, it got underneath it. The anchoring stakes, designed for a gentle afternoon, were ripped from the soft ground as if they were mere toothpicks. In an instant, the entire bounce house, with 4 young children still tumbling inside, became a rudderless, helium-filled airship. It did not deflate or collapse, it ascended. The initial lift was slow, almost dreamlike, but it quickly accelerated, caught in a strong thermal current. The children inside were no longer bouncing, they were weightless, a tangle of limbs and screams tumbling in a brightly colored prison as it soared over the startled heads of their parents. The castle climbed to a height of nearly 30 feet, a surreal and terrifying spectacle against the blue sky. It traveled laterally for what felt like an eternity, carried by the wind across the park before its flight path was abruptly halted by the sturdy, outstretched branches of a massive oak tree. The inflatable structure did not pop. It settled into the canopy with a rustle of leaves and plastic, cradled precariously like a bizarre, modern bird's nest. The silence that followed was more horrifying than the screams. For a moment, there was no sound from within the castle. Then, a single, tentative whimper broke the quiet, followed by a chorus of crying. The parents and other adults sprinted across the field, their hearts in their throats, scrambling up the tree's lower branches to reach the children. One by one, they were carefully extracted from the vinyl enclosure, passed down a human chain of trembling hands to the safety of the grass below. Miraculously, not a single child had a serious injury, just a collection of scratches from the tree branches and a profound universal shock. The birthday party was over, replaced by a scene of frantic hugs and tearful reunions. The bounce house remained wedged in the tree for 2 days, a stark and flapping monument to the day. A simple childhood pleasure briefly turned into a parent's worst nightmare, proving that even the most anchored fun can be swept away by a sudden change in the atmosphere. A misprinted invitation can unravel even the most carefully laid plans. One family had planned their son's party for a Saturday, sending out beautifully designed cards to his entire class. The proof, however, contained a tiny, catastrophic error, transposing the date so it read 1 week earlier. The parents, thrilled with the design, never noticed the mistake, and 24 invitations went out with the wrong day. The first sign of trouble was the doorbell ringing that prior Saturday morning. The father, still in his bathrobe and holding a cup of coffee, opened the door to find a beaming child holding a brightly wrapped present with a cheerful parent waiting behind them. His confusion was immediate and total. He stammered that the party was next week, but the parent politely but firmly pointed to the date printed clearly on the invitation in their hand. As they stood there in a standoff, more cars began pulling up to the curb. The quiet suburban street was suddenly filling with children in party clothes, all arriving for a celebration that did not exist. Panic set in. The house was a mess. There was no birthday cake, no planned activities, and most critically, no extra food. The parents had two choices: turn away 24 disappointed children or perform a miracle of improvisation. They chose the latter, ushering the bewildered guests inside with strained smiles. The mother began a frantic raid of the kitchen pantry while the father tried to entertain the growing crowd. The party favors were whatever small toys could be scavenged from the bottom of the toy box. The menu was a bizarre assortment of whatever was on hand, a culinary snapshot of a family's weekly groceries. Children were served a mix of fish crackers, random fruit cups, frozen pizza bites heated in batches, and a surprising number of pickles. The cake was the ultimate improvisation, a box of brownie mix baked in a sheet pan and hastily decorated with a lone candle and a message scrawled in rainbow sprinkles that simply read, "Oops." The children, blissfully unaware of the chaos, found the whole affair wonderfully strange and exciting. They ate pickles and brownies while playing an impromptu game of hide and seek, creating a party out of pure, unfiltered chaos. The real birthday party the following week felt almost anticlimactic, a perfectly planned event that could never compete with the legendary accidental party born from a printer's error. Even the most loyal family member can reach their breaking point. The constant noise and commotion of a child's birthday party had pushed the family's golden retriever, Barnaby, to his absolute limit. He was used to being the center of attention, but for hours he had been shoved aside, his favorite napping spot invaded by running, screaming children. The final straw was the arrival of the cake, a magnificent frosted monument that was carried right past his nose without so much as a crumb offered. As the party reached its peak volume, Barnaby slunk away from the chaos, a quiet, furry strategist plotting his revenge. He had watched his humans operate the refrigerator for years, his intelligent eyes noting the precise motion of the handle. He waited for the perfect moment when all the adults were distracted by a raucous game of musical chairs in the living room. With a determined focus, he approached the appliance. His first attempt, a simple nudge with his nose, failed. Undeterred, he reared up on his hind legs, placing his front paws on the handle for leverage. He leaned his full weight backward, and with a satisfying click, the door swung open. The glorious, chilled air of the refrigerator washed over him, and there it was, sitting on the middle shelf in all its sugary glory. The cake was his. He worked with a methodical, almost artistic precision. He did not simply knock the cake to the floor. He carefully pulled the large platter out with his teeth, setting it down gently before beginning his feast. He started with the roses, then moved to the sides, meticulously licking off every last bit of buttercream. He consumed the entire top layer, then moved to the bottom, leaving behind a scene of pure confectionery devastation. When the musical chairs champion was finally crowned and the family marched into the kitchen for the cake-cutting ceremony, they found Barnaby lying in the middle of the floor, his head resting peacefully on the empty cake platter. His white muzzle was completely coated in chocolate frosting, and a single blue sprinkle was stuck to his eyebrow. He did not look triumphant, merely deeply, profoundly satisfied, and perhaps a little bit sleepy from his enormous meal. The trail of evidence led directly from the open refrigerator door to his frosting-covered paws. The birthday girl took one look at the carnage and burst into tears, while Barnaby, in response, let out a small, contented sigh. He had finally gotten the quiet, personal celebration he felt he deserved, even if it meant digesting an entire cake by himself. Gift exchanges are meant to be full of playful surprises, but one teen party discovered that not all surprises are created equal. The game was a white elephant exchange, a tradition where silly, unwanted gifts are stolen and swapped in a chaotic free-for-all. The pile of presents was a mixed bag of gags and genuine offerings, but two packages sat at opposite ends of the spectrum. One was a lumpy, poorly wrapped bundle that contained a single, notoriously smelly gym sock from the school locker room, a gag gift from one boy to his best friend. The other was a small, elegant box holding a delicate silver necklace with a real turquoise stone, an expensive present from a grandmother. In the frenzy of the game, with laughter and shouted trades, the two gifts were accidentally switched. The boy who had brought the sock, following the rules, had his own gift stolen from him. When his turn came again, he saw the small, elegant box and pounced, thinking he was finally upgrading from the terrible present he was holding. He triumphantly opened it to reveal the beautiful necklace. At the same time, the girl who was supposed to receive her grandmother's necklace unwrapped the lumpy package, her smile dissolving into horrified confusion as she pulled out the used, pungent sock. The room fell silent. She was humiliated, convinced someone had deliberately insulted her, and burst into tears. The boy, seeing her reaction and now holding the necklace, was accused of being a cruel thief. A dramatic confrontation erupted, fueled by teenage angst and misunderstanding. He was called horrible names, she was sobbing uncontrollably, and the party's festive mood shattered in an instant. It took the intervention of a mortified parent who had been helping with the gifts to piece together the terrible logistics of the swap. The truth was a relief, but also deeply awkward. The boy had to hand over the necklace, the girl had to accept a mumbled apology for a mistake that was not his fault, and the legendary gym sock was left abandoned on the coffee table, a smelly monument to a gift exchange where the real surprise was just how badly a simple mix-up could unravel an entire party. Sometimes the most confusing guest turns out to be the best present of all. At a bustling community pool party for a boy named Liam, the chaos of splashing children and shouting parents created the perfect conditions for a case of mistaken identity. A new family had just moved into the neighborhood, and their son, Leo, was invited by a classmate who was also attending Liam's party. No one had any idea that Leo was Liam's spitting image. From the moment they both arrived in their matching blue swim trunks, the doubling act began. Parents would hand a juice box to Leo, thinking he was Liam, only to find the real Liam standing a few feet away, equally thirsty. During the organized games, when Liam won a round of pool noodle races, the prize, a small squirt gun, was mistakenly awarded to Leo, who accepted it with a confused but polite thank you. The two boys orbited each other all afternoon, a pair of identical satellites in a universe of wet concrete and chlorinated water, constantly being pulled into the other's social gravity. They were handed each other slices of birthday cake, each boy too shy to correct the adult and simply eating the dessert they were given. They were both pulled into group photos, creating a permanent record of the duplication for the family album. At first, it was a source of minor frustration. Liam would try to tell a story to his friends, and Leo would finish it, having heard the other version from his own group. But as the party wore on, the constant mix-ups became a shared joke. They started to lean into the chaos, intentionally swapping places to see if they could fool Liam's own grandparents, which they did spectacularly. The moment of true connection came during the present opening. Liam was handed a beautifully wrapped box from Leo's family. He opened it to find an intricate model rocket, exactly the kind he had been wanting for months. His eyes went wide and he looked directly at Leo, who was beaming with pride. It was Leo's own favorite thing, and he had begged his parents to get it for the birthday boy. In that moment, they realized they were not just doppelgangers in face, but in spirit. The party that began with two boys living one life ended with them vowing to start a new one together, as best friends who finally found the one person who truly understood what it was like to be them. The desire for a spectacular scientific demonstration can sometimes override basic kitchen logic. For one boy's birthday, his parents decided a mad scientist theme was the perfect way to combine fun and a little bit of learning. They planned the ultimate centerpiece, a homemade volcano that would put all other vinegar and baking soda experiments to shame. The problem was one of scale. A simple paper mache cone would not suffice, not for this party. The father, an enthusiastic amateur, decided to build his eruption chamber from a 5-gallon plastic bucket, reasoning that bigger was unequivocally better. He constructed a magnificent mountain around it using chicken wire and plaster, painting it in realistic shades of gray and brown. It was an impressive sight, towering over the kitchen island in their newly renovated all-white kitchen. The children, wearing lab coats and safety goggles, gathered around with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. The father, playing the part of the mad professor, explained the chemical reaction with a theatrical flair. He had prepared his reactants with the same grand ambition. Instead of a few cups, he poured an entire gallon of vinegar into the bucket, along with a generous squirt of red food coloring and a hearty glug of dish soap to make the foam extra thick and lava-like. Then, with a dramatic pause, he instructed his assistant, the birthday boy, to add the catalyst, a full 2-pound box of baking soda. The reaction was not just immediate, it was cataclysmic. A thick, frothy, crimson foam erupted from the bucket with a powerful hiss, far exceeding the confines of the plaster caldera. It did not just bubble over the sides, it launched itself upward in a sticky, roiling column that slammed directly into the pristine white ceiling. The foam spread across the ceiling in a rapidly expanding red stain, then began to drip back down in long, gooey tendrils, coating the cabinets, the island, and the laughing, then shrieking children below. The sheer volume of the foaming mass created a mist of vinegar and soap that drifted through the air, and this acidic cloud was just dense enough to be mistaken for smoke by the hypersensitive, newly installed smoke detector above the kitchen entrance. A piercing, relentless shriek joined the chaos, adding a soundtrack of pure panic to the visual disaster. The kitchen now looked like the scene of a gelatinous monster's violent demise. The parents' triumph had become a sticky, scarlet nightmare, a cautionary tale written in baking soda and vinegar on the one place they never expected it to reach. The sheer panic of a missing child can turn a celebration into a scene of pure terror. At a sprawling park party, the atmosphere shifted from joyful to frantic in a single, heart-stopping moment. A mother, her voice tight with alarm, announced she could not find her 4-year-old son, Leo. He had been right beside the picnic table just minutes before, clutching a half-eaten cookie. The initial, calm search among the party guests quickly escalated as he failed to appear. His name was called, first in a normal tone, then with increasing volume and desperation. Every adult and older child fanned out across the park, their eyes scanning playground equipment, public restrooms, and the dense thicket of trees at the park's edge. The joyful birthday music was turned off, replaced by the sound of worried voices calling Leo's name over and over. The park itself seemed to swallow the sound, the vast openness offering no clues. After 20 minutes of fruitless searching, someone made the decision to call park security. 2 uniformed officers arrived and began a more systematic, grid-based search of the area, their walkie-talkies crackling with tense updates. The birthday party was completely forgotten, the cake uneaten and the presents unopened as the entire event became a single-minded rescue mission. The mother was now openly weeping, supported by her friends, her mind racing with every parent's worst nightmare. The search had been going on for nearly 45 minutes when one of the officers, doubling back near the party's own setup, noticed something odd about a large, hollow decorative log that had been part of the park's landscaping for years. It was meant to be a whimsical photo spot, but one end was dark and deep. He shined his flashlight into the opening. There, curled into a perfect, peaceful ball at the very center of the log, was Leo. He was fast asleep, his cheek resting on the soft, rotting wood, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The cookie was still clutched in his hand. The commotion, the shouting, the panic, the crackling radios, none of it had penetrated his deep, impromptu slumber. The relief that washed over the crowd was a physical force. His mother rushed over, sobbing with a different kind of intensity as she carefully extracted her son from his wooden cocoon. He woke up bleary-eyed and confused, wondering why everyone was crying and looking at him. He had simply found a quiet, cozy spot that felt just like a cave and had decided it was the perfect place for a nap, completely unaware that he had just starred in a real-life drama that turned a birthday party into an emotional marathon. Some celebrations are hijacked not by chaos, but by a single, breathtakingly selfish decision. The birthday girl's sister had brought her new boyfriend, a charismatic and slightly theatrical man named Chad, to the family gathering. The party was in full swing in the backyard, with guests mingling and the birthday girl, Sarah, finally feeling like the center of attention after years in her older sister's shadow. That was the moment Chad chose to clink his glass with a spoon, calling for everyone's focus. A hush fell over the crowd. He launched into a heartfelt speech about love and destiny, his eyes locked not on the birthday girl but on his girlfriend, Sarah's sister. The family's polite smiles slowly froze as they realized what was happening. This was not a toast, it was a takeover. On cue, a string quartet he had secretly hired began to play from the corner of the patio. Chad dropped to one knee, producing a velvet box. The girlfriend, utterly stunned, burst into happy tears and said yes. The crowd of guests, a mix of family and Sarah's own friends, erupted in a confused but celebratory applause. All cameras previously aimed at Sarah blowing out her candles now swiveled to capture the proposal. The party's entire energy pivoted in an instant. The birthday cake was forgotten, the presents were ignored, and the conversation was entirely about the engagement. Sarah stood by the picnic table, her smile plastered and brittle, completely upstaged at her own party. The real damage, however, happened after the guests left. The family argument that erupted was legendary. The parents were furious at Chad for his staggering lack of awareness and for ruining their daughter's day. The sister was defensive, caught between her new fiancé and her family, insisting everyone was overreacting and should be happy for her. Harsh words were exchanged about entitlement and disrespect, creating a fissure that ran deep. The entire disastrous sequence, from the clinking glass to Sarah's heartbroken expression, was captured on a single, unflinching home video. A relative, thinking they were preserving a happy memory, had kept the camera rolling. That tape became a cursed family relic, and when it was eventually digitized and leaked online years later by a disgruntled family friend, it found a second life as a viral sensation. The video, titled "World's Most Selfish Proposal," was dissected in comment sections and reaction videos, making the family's private rift a source of public cringe for years. The engagement, ironically, did not last, but the memory of that birthday party and the years of strained holidays it caused became a permanent part of their history. A simple birthday cake can hide a danger nobody saw coming. The party was a classic backyard celebration, filled with the sounds of laughing children and the sweet smell of grilled hot dogs. The dessert table was a magnificent spread, featuring a beautiful sheet cake decorated with colorful buttercream flowers. One of the guests, a quiet boy named Ethan, had a severe nut allergy, but his parents had only recently discovered it and had not yet shared the diagnosis with the wider circle of friends. They had simply planned to keep a very close watch on what he ate, a plan that seemed foolproof until the chaos of a party took over. When the cake was served, a well-meaning parent handed Ethan a large slice, not knowing it was a special recipe containing finely ground walnuts for added flavor and texture. He took a few eager bites. The reaction was terrifyingly swift. Within minutes, his lips began to swell and his breathing became a strained, wheezing effort. He started scratching at his neck, his eyes wide with a fear he could not articulate. The joyful noise of the party died away as his mother recognized the signs, her own heart seizing with panic. She screamed for her husband to get the EpiPen from her purse. The scene that followed was one of controlled terror. As his father fumbled with the medical device, another guest dialed 911, their voice shaking as they relayed the address. The injection was administered right there on the grass, a stark medical intrusion into the festive atmosphere. The ambulance arrived with blaring sirens, its flashing lights painting the cheerful decorations in alternating shades of red and blue. Ethan was rushed to the hospital, his parents clinging to his hands in the back of the vehicle. For everyone left in the backyard, the party was over. The half-eaten cake sat on the table, no longer a treat but a symbol of a nearly catastrophic oversight. The other parents stood in stunned, silent groups, their own children clinging to their legs, trying to understand why their friend had been taken away. It was a shared, sobering lesson in the invisible dangers that can lurk in a seemingly innocent piece of birthday cake. Fortunately, the quick action and the epinephrine saved Ethan's life. He made a full recovery, but the emotional impact on that community of parents was permanent. From that day forward, every birthday party invitation included a bold, clear question about food allergies, and no dessert was ever served without a full and public accounting of its ingredients. The celebration had been halted by fear, but it ultimately forged a new standard of care, a communal promise to protect every child from a threat they might not even know exists. A treasure hunt can transform a backyard into a vast ocean of adventure, but sometimes the pirates sail right off the map. For one young buccaneer's birthday, his parents designed an elaborate quest with a series of cryptic clues written on aged parchment leading to a chest filled with chocolate gold coins and plastic jewels. The final clue was intentionally poetic, instructing the young adventurers to seek the spot where the Red Queen reigns supreme, a reference to a prize-winning crimson rose bush in the family's own garden. The children, however, were a crew of literal-minded sailors. Interpreting the Red Queen as a more regal and prominent figure, they decided it must refer to the massive, prize-winning rose garden next door, a meticulously manicured display owned by a neighbor known for his low tolerance for noise and his absolute obsession with his flowers. With a shared, determined gleam in their eyes, the pack of children, armed with toy shovels and a genuine garden spade one of them had grabbed from a shed, charged through a gap in the hedges. They descended upon the neighbor's pristine lawn like a swarm of locusts. They zeroed in on the largest, most magnificent red rose bush, the undeniable monarch of the garden, and with a furious, coordinated effort, they began to dig. They were not making a small exploratory hole. They were excavating for buried treasure with the fervor of seasoned prospectors, creating a crater nearly 3 feet wide and 2 feet deep, piling rich, dark soil directly onto the surrounding floral borders. The grumpy neighbor, Mr. Henderson, was alerted not by noise, but by a sudden, sickening feeling that something was amiss with his precious roses. He looked out his bay window and witnessed the scene of horticultural carnage. His roar of pure, unadulterated fury could be heard 2 houses down. He stormed into his garden, his face a thundercloud, halting the young pirates mid-dig. The children froze, one of them ankle-deep in the hole, clutching a shovel and staring up at the apoplectic man. The birthday boy's parents, wondering about the sudden silence from the treasure hunt, arrived through the hedge to find a tableau of utter devastation and a neighbor delivering a lecture on soil composition and rose root systems with the intensity of a Supreme Court justice. The confrontation was icy and deeply humiliating. The promise of chocolate gold faded into the stark reality of a very large bill for professional landscaping repairs and the replacement of several prize-winning rose bushes that had been irreparably damaged. The real treasure, it turned out, was not in the chest, but the very expensive lesson that even the most cleverly written clues are no match for a child's unwavering and terribly misguided literal interpretation. A simple backyard water slide holds a surprising amount of potential energy when you forget about gravity. This family aimed for a summer thrill, unrolling a long, bright yellow slip end slide down what they thought was a gentle, grassy slope. The initial test run by an older cousin seemed fine, a quick, fun zip to the bottom. They did not account for the slickness of the wet plastic combined with the slope's deceptive gradient, a combination that turned a children's toy into a high-velocity launch ramp. The first child to go after the water was fully flowing shot down the length at an alarming speed. Instead of slowing to a stop at the end, the plastic acted like a perfect lubricated track, propelling him off the terminal end with the momentum of a human cannonball. His trajectory sent him airborne, clearing the intended safety zone of towels and landing directly in the middle of his mother's prized and notoriously thorny prize-winning rose bush. The initial shock of the cold water was replaced by the sharp sting of 100 tiny pricks. A single, high-pitched wail broke the summer air. The following children, seeing the first victim being extracted from the foliage with a collection of scratches and a single, dramatically bleeding scrape on his arm, did not see a warning. They saw a challenge. One after another, they lined up to be launched, each one soaring into the same thorny net. The parents stationed at the bottom transformed from lifeguards into a triage unit, plucking crying, bleeding children from the rose bush and applying bandages as fast as they could. The dramatic injury, the one that required the biggest bandage and the most consoling, was entirely superficial, a long but shallow scratch that looked far worse than it actually was. The birthday boy, however, declared it the most awesome party ever, his own minor scratches worn like badges of honor. The real casualty was the rose bush, which was flattened into a sad, thorny mattress, and the parents' notion that a simple hill could ever be just a simple hill again. A stage hypnotist seemed like the perfect entertainment for a rowdy group of teenagers, a surefire way to create hilarious and harmless memories. The performer, a charismatic man with a dazzling smile, began his act by selecting volunteers from the eager crowd of kids, all vying for a chance to be the center of attention. He guided them through a series of relaxation techniques, his voice a smooth, calming drone. The birthday boy's father, a stern and practical man who had been observing from the back of the room with his arms crossed, was not a volunteer. He was simply watching, his expression one of mild skepticism. As the hypnotist paced, he casually rested a hand on the father's shoulder while continuing his monologue, a seemingly innocuous gesture. It was a critical error. The father, already relaxed from a long week, was far more susceptible than anyone could have guessed. His eyelids fluttered and closed, his rigid posture softened, and he slipped into a deep, unexpected trance right there in his dining room chair. The hypnotist, completely unaware of his accidental subject, continued his show with the teenagers on stage. His first command to his volunteers was to imagine they were farm animals. The teenagers began to oink and neigh with giggling enthusiasm, but a new, much deeper sound joined the chorus. A loud, perfectly executed chicken cluck echoed from the back of the room. Every head turned to see the father, a respected accountant, puffing his chest and clucking with profound seriousness. The room fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the hypnotist's confused stammer. He had no idea who this man was or how he had become part of the act. The situation escalated when the hypnotist, trying to regain control, instructed his volunteers to believe they were world-class athletes. He told them they were Olympic figure skaters. The father, however, heard a different cue. He rose from his chair with a surprising grace, stood on his tiptoes, and began to perform a slow, earnest interpretation of Swan Lake right there on the living room rug. His movements were a bizarre mix of masculine rigidity and balletic flourish, his face a mask of intense concentration. The teenagers were no longer laughing at the hypnotist's jokes. They were completely captivated by this impromptu solo performance from a man they had only ever seen discussing lawn care or the stock market. The hypnotist, now in a full panic, tried every command he knew to break the trance, but the father was locked in. He spent the remainder of the party as a renowned ballet dancer, introducing himself to bewildered parents as Mikhail and offering them critiques on their posture. He pirouetted around the dessert table and used a baguette as a bar for his stretches. The birthday boy was simultaneously mortified and delighted, watching his no-nonsense dad become the life of the party in the most unexpected way possible. The trance finally wore off 2 hours later as the hypnotist was packing his equipment. The father simply blinked, sat down on the sofa, and asked why his legs were so sore. He had no memory of his performance, and the family decided by unanimous and silent vote that it was a story best saved for a much later date. 3 children arrived at the party, each convinced they were the sole guardian of a little-known hero called the Crimson Beetle. The costume was intricate, a deep red bodysuit with iridescent wing casings and a mask with long, feathery antennae. For weeks, each child had painstakingly assembled their outfit, believing their interpretation was unique. The moment they laid eyes on each other across the crowded living room, a territorial chill descended. The initial confusion quickly curdled into rivalry. Each one insisted they were the genuine article, their voices rising in a chorus of prepubescent outrage. One boy pointed out that his wings were more accurate based on a specific comic book panel. A girl argued that her antennae were the correct length, citing an animated special. The third child, his costume slightly bulkier, simply planted his feet and declared himself the one true beetle. The debate grew so heated that the other party guests formed a silent, fascinated circle around them. Parents tried to mediate, but their logic was useless against the fervent belief of 3 dedicated superheroes. The party was grinding to a halt, the birthday celebration forgotten in the face of this cosmic crisis of identity. The impasse broke only when a smaller child, dressed head to toe in shimmery purple scales as the Beetle's arch-nemesis, the Gloom Gobbler, saw his opportunity. Letting out a gurgling roar, he began to menace a bowl of cheese puffs, pretending to smother them in his gloomy power. The 3 crimson beetles stopped their bickering and turned as one. A common enemy had emerged. Without a word, they fell into a perfectly synchronized formation, their previous argument vaporized by a shared sense of purpose. They launched a coordinated counterattack, using their pool noodle stingers to drive the Gloom Gobbler away from the snack table and into a corner of the backyard. Their teamwork was flawless, a beautiful, unspoken dance of heroism. Once the villain was vanquished and the cheese puffs were declared safe, the 3 beetles looked at each other, their masks hiding triumphant smiles. They never did agree on who was the real one, but in that moment it no longer mattered. They had formed a league, a trio of champions united against gloom, and the rest of the party was spent patrolling the yard together, a formidable red squadron protecting the realm of birthday cake and pin the tail on the donkey. That prankster parent had envisioned a moment of pure, shimmering magic, a single, contained puff of glitter to crown the cake cutting with a touch of whimsy. The device itself was a homemade contraption, a repurposed plastic container rigged with a small, powerful spring and a latch connected to a long, decorative ribbon. The idea was simple. The birthday child would pull the ribbon to release the latch, and a gentle cloud of glitter would descend upon the cake. The execution, however, was a catastrophic miscalculation of physics. In his enthusiasm, the father had packed the container not with a light dusting of craft glitter, but with an entire industrial-sized bag of ultra-fine holographic glitter, compressing it tightly to ensure a truly spectacular show. He had, in effect, created a glitter-based pressure bomb. The moment arrived, the birthday girl, beaming with excitement, gave the ribbon a hearty tug. Instead of a soft click, there was a deafening pop. The over-tensioned spring, finally freed, unleashed its stored energy all at once. The container did not open, it exploded. A dense, metallic mushroom cloud of every color imaginable erupted from the center of the table. It was not a gentle descent, it was a furious, expanding shockwave of shimmering particulate. The force of the blast was strong enough to blow out the candles and send paper plates fluttering from the table. The glitter did not simply fall, it propelled itself with unnatural adhesion onto every surface and every person in the immediate vicinity. The children, who had been leaning in with expectant smiles, were instantly transformed into gasping, sparkling statues. Their hair, their faces, their brand new party clothes were coated in a thick, gritty layer of rainbow dust. The cloud filled the entire living room, settling on the television screen, the sofa, the family photographs on the mantel, and the unsuspecting family cat who had been napping peacefully on a nearby armchair. The feline shot into the air with a yowl, now a terrified, glittery comet streaking through the house, spreading the disaster into every room it fled through. The silence after the initial gasp was profound, broken only by the faint, continuous shimmering sound of a million tiny particles still drifting through the air. The cleanup was a lesson in futility. Vacuums choked on the stuff, cloths merely smeared it deeper into fabrics, and every attempt to wipe a surface only seemed to activate the glitter, making it sparkle more brightly under the lights. The party ended not with joy, but with a line of children being hosed down in the backyard by apologetic parents, their colorful runoff staining the patio. For months and even years afterward, the glitter persisted. It would appear in the butter weeks later, sparkle from a business report at a parent's important meeting, and glint from the fur of a traumatized cat every time it passed through a sunbeam. The prankster's attempt at a magical moment had backfired, leaving behind a permanent, twinkling reminder that some surprises are simply impossible to clean up. A surprise singing telegram is meant to be a brief, joyful interruption, not a permanent new guest. The performer arrived in a full Elvis Presley costume, complete with oversized sunglasses and a glittering jumpsuit, to deliver a birthday message from a distant aunt to a very amused father. He performed his number with professional gusto, his voice a surprisingly good imitation of the king himself, and the entire party cheered and clapped when he finished. That was the moment he should have taken his bow and exited. Instead, he removed his sunglasses, declared the family had fantastic energy, and asked if anyone minded if he grabbed a quick drink. Before anyone could formulate a polite response, he was at the beverage cooler, filling a red plastic cup with punch. He then migrated to the snack table, loading a plate with mini sandwiches and potato chips. The family exchanged uncertain glances but decided to be polite, assuming he would finish his snack and go. He did not go. He found a vacant patio chair, settled in, and began making conversation with the birthday boy's teenage cousins. An hour later, he was still there, having swapped his punch for a soda, and now debating the greatest rock and roll albums of all time. The father's polite smiles became strained. He approached the man and said with forced cheer, "Well, thanks so much for the wonderful performance. We certainly won't keep you any longer." The Elvis impersonator waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't you worry about me. I'm off the clock, just enjoying the company." He then proceeded to join a game of cornhole, celebrating his points with a little hip-shaking victory dance. The final straw came when the birthday cake was brought out. The man lined up with the family to get a slice, even suggesting he should get the first piece since he was, in his words, the entertainment. The father had finally reached his limit. He walked over, placed a firm hand on the man's sequined shoulder, and spoke in a low, no-nonsense tone that brooked no argument. "The party is over for you. It is time for you to leave now." The performer's jovial demeanor finally faltered. He looked genuinely surprised, as if the concept of being an uninvited guest had never occurred to him. Muttering about ungrateful audiences, he reluctantly gathered his portable speaker and slunk out the gate, taking one last, longing look at the unfinished cake on his way. The family was left with a bizarre story and the lingering question of how many other parties that particular Elvis might still be attending. Sometimes the most memorable celebrations are the ones you never planned. For one girl's 10th birthday, her parents had organized a perfect evening party, complete with a disco ball, a playlist of her favorite pop songs, and a light-up dance floor rented for the occasion. The summer sky, however, had other ideas. A sudden, violent thunderstorm rolled in just as the first guests arrived, turning the backyard into a wind-whipped mess and forcing the entire party indoors. The children, initially disappointed, quickly adapted. their laughter echoing through the brightly lit house as the storm raged outside. Then, with a blinding flash of white light and an instantaneous, deafening crack of thunder, everything went black. The music died mid-beat, the disco ball froze, and the house was plunged into a profound, silent darkness. For a moment, nobody moved or spoke, the only sound the relentless drumming of rain on the roof. Then a single, nervous whimper broke the silence, quickly followed by the rising panic of 24 children realizing they were trapped in the dark. The parents scrambled, their cell phone flashlights creating frantic, swooping beams of light as they tried to calm the terrified guests. The initial plan was a disaster. The birthday girl was on the verge of tears, her perfect party ruined. But then her grandmother, a woman who had lived through more than a few blackouts, took charge. She calmly directed the parents to gather every candle they could find, from the fancy scented ones in the living room to the emergency stubs in the kitchen drawers. Soon the dining room was bathed in a soft, warm, flickering glow. The shadows danced on the walls, transforming the familiar space into a mysterious, cozy cavern. The panic subsided, replaced by a hushed sense of wonder. With no electronics to distract them, the children began to invent their own fun. They told spooky stories by candlelight, their faces illuminated from below, making the tales feel thrillingly real. They played shadow puppets against the wall, creating elaborate menageries of dogs and birds with their hands. Someone found a deck of cards, and a spirited game of Go Fish began on the floor. The birthday cake, a magnificent confection with electric blue frosting, was brought out and lit with a single, tall candle. The sight of it glowing in the center of the table, surrounded by the hushed, expectant faces of her friends, was infinitely more magical than any light-up dance floor could have been. They sang Happy Birthday in the near dark, their voices soft and unified, creating a moment of pure, unplugged connection. The power was out for over 4 hours, long after the last guest had been picked up by flashlight-wielding parents. When the lights finally flickered back on, the ordinary brightness felt harsh and intrusive. The family looked around at the candle drips on the table and the shadow puppet stage they had created, and they all agreed. The chaotic, unplanned candlelit party had been far more special than the meticulously organized one they had intended to throw. It was a powerful reminder that the best memories are often born not from a perfect plan, but from the beautiful, unexpected ways we find to come together when the lights go out. Sometimes the most chaotic moments are born from the simplest acts of kindness. The final story in our collection takes us to a backyard celebration for a young boy named Alex, a party that seemed to have concluded as a perfect success. The children had gone home happy, the cake was reduced to crumbs, and the only task left was the final cleanup. Alex's grandmother, a wonderfully thoughtful woman named Carol, had insisted on staying behind to help her exhausted daughter restore order. She moved through the quiet yard with a sense of purpose, gathering stray cups, collapsing tables, and diligently bagging up every piece of trash she could find. Her mission was to leave the space spotless, a final gift to the family. In her zealous and well-meaning sweep, she spotted a large, nondescript black trash bag sitting near the back door. Assuming it was the last of the party refuse, she hoisted it into the large wheeled bin at the curb, just as the garbage truck rumbled onto their street for its weekly pickup. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, completely unaware that the bag did not contain discarded plates and napkins. It held 30 meticulously prepared goodie bags, each one filled with candy, small toys, and a personalized thank you note. More critically, it also contained a small, ceramic bowl where several parents had deposited their spare car keys for safekeeping during the party. The disaster was discovered minutes later, just as the garbage truck's mechanical arm was lifting the bin. A mother who had stayed to chat realized her keys were missing. A frantic search began, which quickly led to the horrifying realization that the goodie bag was gone. Carol, her face falling in dawning horror, confessed what she had done. The truck had already compacted its load and was moving down the street, a rolling metal tomb for their precious cargo. This was not a simple inconvenience. Several families were now stranded, with their primary sets of keys locked inside their vehicles at the house. A call to the city's public works department was met with a grim prognosis. The truck's route would not end for another 3 hours at a transfer station on the outskirts of town. The only chance of recovery was to meet the truck there and petition the crew for access to the mountain of refuse. What followed was a surreal late-night expedition. A convoy of 3 cars carrying the stranded parents, a mortified grandmother, and the birthday boy's father drove across the city to a vast, dimly lit industrial yard. The air was thick with the sour smell of decay. The garbage truck was there, parked beside a small mountain of tightly compressed trash. After a lot of pleading and explaining the bizarre situation to the skeptical but ultimately sympathetic crew, permission was granted. The parents, armed with flashlights and wearing borrowed work gloves, had to climb the shifting slope of garbage to find the one specific bag they needed. It was a desperate, grimy treasure hunt, with flashlights cutting through the gloom as they sifted through coffee grounds, diapers, and broken-down cardboard. Carol stood at the base of the pile, near tears, repeating over and over how sorry she was. After nearly an hour of searching, a triumphant shout echoed across the transfer station. One of the fathers had found it, the black bag miraculously intact, though now smeared with unidentifiable grime. The recovery was a moment of pure, exhausted relief. The goodie bags were a lost cause, but the keys were fished out of the ceramic bowl, washed off with bottled water, and returned to their owners. The party ended not with the last guest leaving, but with a group of adults standing in a parking lot at midnight, clutching their salvaged keys and smelling faintly of the city's collective waste. It was the ultimate party foul, a cascade of consequences triggered by a grandmother's desire to help, proving that even after the last candle is blown out, the potential for unforgettable chaos is never truly gone. From balloon avalanches to treasure-hunting pirates who dug up a neighbor's prize roses, we have journeyed through a gallery of glorious birthday chaos. We have seen magicians vanish a little too well, bears raid the coolers, and entire parties held hostage by a single, looping karaoke track. These 33 stories are a testament to the beautiful unpredictability of trying to orchestrate a perfect day of celebration. The meticulously planned party can be derailed by a single goat's cleverness, while a sudden blackout can create a moment of pure, candlelit magic that was never on the agenda. It is in these unscripted moments, these confectionery shipwrecks and uninvited animal guests, that the most enduring family legends are born. The disaster you lament today becomes the story you laugh about for decades, the shared memory that bonds you tighter than any perfectly executed party game ever could. So the next time your own celebration takes an unexpected turn, remember these tales, embrace the beautiful mess. What is the most bizarre, hilarious, or unforgettable birthday story from your own life? We would love to hear your tales of party chaos in the comments below. Thank you for joining us on this wild ride through the weirdest American birthday parties. If you enjoyed these glimpses into the unpredictable heart of celebration, be sure to subscribe for more fascinating stories from the tapestry of everyday life.